good morning, everyone. So, in behalf of the organizing committee of this ceremony, I would like to thank Mr. Cole for this kind introduction, and I would like to ask to Stuart Cole and also to Pascal Cossard and Arnaud Echard to join us on the stage for this round table that we organized at the last minute. So, as Monica said, Pascal Cossard is a renowned scientist here in Pasteur and is also a member of the French Academy of Sciences. And Arnaud Echard is also a PI here in Pasteur and is head of the director, is head of the Unité Trafic Membranaire and Division Cellulaire, and also the president of the French Society for Cell Biology. So they're going to discuss with us about their experience as a scientist, as a young scientist maybe. And so we prepare just a few questions for starting this round table. Probably they don't say them. So the first question, if you probably want to try to ask, if you could briefly summarize what was the starting of your career as a scientist. Who, I don't know, do you have a microphone? Thank you.
Ladies first.
Okay, so the first question is, could you briefly sum up your post-thesis career? Okay, so I performed my PhD thesis in George Cohen's lab in this part of the Pasteur Institute, and for my postdoc, I crossed the street and I went to Moshe Yanif's lab. And maybe some people are thinking already that I should have gone for a postdoc in a foreign country, but I have been going to a foreign country before my thesis. And I think it's important maybe to this audience to realize that your path is not necessarily straight. And in fact, I majored in chemistry in Lille, and then I started a thesis, but since my mentor was going somewhere else, I decided to go to the States, where I did a Master of Science. And then I came back to Paris in the lab of George Cohen, where I performed my PhD. That's why when I had to do a postdoc, I decided to cross the street, but to change totally topic, because at the time, it was the beginning of gene sequencing, and I'm happy to say that at the time, we were the first group to sequence DNA in the Pasteur, and we sequenced the gene which was encoding the protein that I had worked during my PhD. So that's to arrive at the beginning of my post-thesis career. And I must say that my post-thesis career has been in Pasteur from 70, I forgot when I got my thesis, 77, something like that, 78, until now, where I am still. So I have changed different topics. I was working on protein sequencing, as I told you, but then I did DNA sequencing of the gene that I just mentioned. And from that, I started to have several collaborations, and one was very important, was with Brigitte Gicquel, and we started to sequence a gene, but very rapidly I became interested in regulation of gene expression. I was switching from structure to regulation, and we had a very, very productive period together. But the direction of the Pasteur considered that our team of 2 members would not be competitive enough on DNA-protein interactions and regulation, and advised us to go to work on infectious disease. And with Brigitte, we thought, and really thought during 6 months, and that was, I think, a very, very important period. We really thought a lot about the project that we would start to work with. And we focused at the end on two bacteria which were responsible for disease. One which became a model organism, which is Listeria, and the second which were Mycobacteria. And after 6 months of working together with Brigitte, we decided that 2 projects for 2 people was too much. And Brigitte worked successfully on Mycobacteria, and I worked successfully on Listeria. And I am still working on Listeria as a model to study different aspects of biology, ranging from fundamental biology to infection biology, going through cell biology, epigenetics, podgenomics, etc. So more or less, this is the summary of what we are doing. And we are still working on different aspects, focusing on RNA regulation, mitochondrial fragmentation, macrobiota, importance during infection of an enteropathogen, etc. So I think I have talked enough, and I pass the microphone to my friend Stuart Cole. And I ask you the same question. Could you briefly sum up your post-thesis career?
Okay, this is quite easy. I think I remember the details. So I did a PhD in the UK at the University of Sheffield on anaerobic electron transport, and after that I decided to go abroad, and I went to, first of all I did a postdoc at the University of Umeå in the north of Sweden, where I worked with Staffan Normark on the AMP-C beta-lactamase gene. Then from Umeå I migrated south and went to the Max Planck Institute for Biology, as it was called in those days, in Tübingen. And there I worked on outer membrane proteins in gram-negative bacteria and started to make a sort of structure-function map of how the proteins were organized and which domains were important for their biological roles and so on. And then I think in 1983 I joined the Institut Pasteur as a young scientist and worked on a variety of things. So one of them was the HIV, which was the very early days when HIV had just been discovered. So I helped sequence the genome of HIV. I also worked on oncogenic papillomaviruses at that point. And then afterwards, when I became more independent, I set up a group where we started to work on leprosy. And at that point in time, tuberculosis started to become increasingly important as a result of the overlap with the HIV pandemic, and also the collapse of the healthcare systems in certain parts of the world. For instance, in New York City, where there were big problems of MDR, TB. So I worked quite a lot. I moved sideways into tuberculosis, and we started off by exploring how Mycobacterium tuberculosis became resistant to the drugs and how treatment failed. And from there, we moved into genome sequencing. And so, with the lab that I led at Pasteur, we sequenced Mycobacterium tuberculosis' genome, and I think the paper was published in 1998, and I think that was the 13th genome of any kind of organism which was ever completed. I followed that up with a bit more work on other mycobacterial genomes, went a little bit sideways into pathogenesis, trying to use genome-based information to explore how Mycobacterium tuberculosis causes disease, why some strains are more virulent than others, and so on. And then in 2007, I was enticed to join the Swiss Federal Institute for Technology in Lausanne, EPFL. And there, the last 10 years, I've spent pretty much all of my time trying to find new leads for development into drugs to treat tuberculosis. And in that context, I've led several major consortia, and these consortia were quite successful because we actually got a drug into the clinic, and it's now in phase two trials in the Russian Federation. So that's a brief history of what happened until October the 13th, when I was appointed the next Director General of the Institut Pasteur, and it's with great enthusiasm that I take up this role in January.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. First of all, congratulations to the young students who are not anymore students. You are already in your post-thesis period, right? And so myself, I remember the day of my graduation in soutenance, which was the 22nd of September 2000. I did my PhD at the Institut Curie, not far from here. And at that time, I started actually in 1995 my so-called DEA, which is Master 2, in this brand new building dedicated to cell biology. So it was a really exciting time. I did my PhD under the supervision of Bruno Good. And I was working on membrane trafficking. Actually, I cloned and characterized the first kinesin, so a molecular motor that moves along microtubules, which was found to be at the Golgi apparatus. So I will mix a bit the questions here, and I will just give you some advices, and just you to realize how nice is the period and excitement for you and ourselves at labs, is that I spent a year, which was great actually, to clone a gene, something that you can just buy now in 5 minutes, and you will have tomorrow on your desk. And really, you cannot realize how fast we go now. And it was a great experience. The first kinesin, we had to sequence it, which took some time. And it was a very interesting period for trafficking in general. And also it's a question of luck, thesis, and also everything afterwards. A lot of luck, not only a luck. It's not sufficient, of course. Hard work, but also work. I remember, I can give you this anecdote. There were two hybrid clones, so a bit of yeast, which were blue. There was a 174 clone and the 74 clone. The 74 clone was never published. It was not me. The 174 was a science paper. So you see, and I just had to, the first day, my director told me, which one do you want to get? I didn't, this one looks more blue. It was the right choice. So a bit of choice, of luck for sure. And then afterwards, before the end of my thesis, actually, I had to do something that you don't have to do anymore for the French guys, which is a military service, which was great. I did my military service for a month as chasseur alpin. You know what is a snow hunter? I don't know how to say this, but there was no snow actually. So it was in November, Barcelonette without snow, it was cool. And I came back and I spent a year working on something completely different for the army, on inhibitors of acetylcholinesterase, which is a target for gas on the battlefield. And I learned a lot of molecular biology here, and so you have to do many different aspects, and I learned a lot there. And then the funny thing is that I was working a lot on the Golgi apparatus, and the kinesin that I cloned was really having also another effect, which was during cell division. And so for my postdoc, I decided to really work on molecular motors in other organisms. And it turned out that at the end, I turned to join the lab of Patrick O'Farrell at UCSF at San Francisco. It was a really a terrific place. And there I studied the activation of the raw GTPase during cytokinesis. And if I can give you an advice here, if you are choosing your first or now second postdoc, as we say, you should definitely change topic. You should work on something you have not worked on. And if possible, also to change the organism, another model, genetics or something else, biochemistry, whatever you want. And this is, I think, very important because afterward in your career, at every stage, you will have to change topics regularly. Every 3, 4, 5 years, the lab will change a bit of direction. And so it's really less comfortable, but much more interesting. So definitely do this, and also don't do almost a mistake that I did, is that I visited only 2 labs. You should visit more. And you should really choose where you find yourself with a good atmosphere, good work, good relationship. I was very lucky because one of the 2 labs was really excellent. And so you have also to catch up on technologies. That would be an advice that I can give you. We were in 2000, it was the beginning of RNAi. In Drosophila, it has just been proven that in Drosophila, double-strand RNAs could give some RNA interference. So we really catch up at that time. We made the first double-strand RNA library for targeting all the genome of Drosophila, and I did the first screen for genome-wide screen for new mutants for cytokinesis, the last step of cell division. And here again, luck, or I don't know, funny enough, it turns out that most of the new genes involved in cytokinesis that we discovered were actually genes already required for membrane trafficking. So I was coming back to my initial studies. And since then, I came back to the CNRS. In 2003, I came back to the Institut Curie. And then I started new projects and the interface between cell division and membrane trafficking. And then I was lucky enough to be hired at Pasteur at G5. And after 5 years, you become Pasteurisé. And I hope I will stay a long time here because it's a great place to work. And now my lab is about 12 persons. And I think that's it. I'm here at this kind of stage.
Let's move to the second question. So why and when did you choose to pursue a career in science? Who wants to start?
Do I have to start? I never asked this question to myself. I always convinced that I would do research. So as soon as I had started to do chemistry studies, I knew that I wanted to do that. So for me, it's a question that I don't ask to myself. Next.
So in my case, it's a little bit more personal. When I was 17, I got paratyphoid and nearly died and was off school at the time for about 6 months. And when I was convalescing, I thought, God, what happened to me? Why did I get so ill? And this provoked an interest in microbiology, so I decided that I'd like to learn more about microbiology. And when I completed my schooling, I went to university and studied microbiology, so I wanted to get my own back. So it was quite just a simple personal anecdote which led to me having a very rich and interesting career in microbiology and infectious disease research.
So I remember it. I was 12. I had a book about protozoa. Okay, and so I decided to make some pictures of protozoa in my room, my bedroom. So I had to boil some wheat grains and wait a week, and then you have this puanteur that comes, and then I had a little microscope at the time. It's funny, and this was I decided really to learn more about science, and of course teachers are very important. Teachers influence a lot a career, and it was when I was 16, I really decided to do biology. And my friends offered me actually 96 well played for my birthday. I didn't know what it was, and so it was funny. It was my first, yeah.
Maybe we should ask the students to ask us questions about that.
There will be time at the end. So next question is, can you tell us something about your worst moment or best moment in your career?
Okay, I can start by the best, because I think it's something which happens very, very often. You know, we saw the question before, so I thought, no, we have wonderful moments very, very often. I think on Friday, for example, I sent a paper for submission. It was something very, very important for me. So even after many, many years, I still have great moments of happiness. So of course, you receive prizes, you are elected in different occasions at different places, but I think the greatest moments are probably when you discover something which is something you were looking for, or you explain a phenomenon. I think I would like to go to the worst, because this was more difficult for me to think what is the worst moment. And I think it's important to say that for me the worst moment was maybe after a few years I had my lab, which was really running very, very, very well. I was not wondering what could happen badly to me. And in fact, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I had a postdoc who arrived and just somehow disturbed my lab, and was a catastrophe, because somehow it became my lab became very disorganized, and I realized at that time that a lab is made of a lot of people. It's made of very bright people. It's made of people who are maybe more powerful to create links between the people. I think a lab is like some kind of organization, and if the organization starts to be disorganized, it can be terrible. And I think this has been the worst period of my life, but now I have recovered, and I am very, very sensitive to the smallest problem which can happen, and if there is a little problem, I go to solve the problem, and that's because maybe this occurs more now than before, but we were educated as scientists, but we were not educated as managers, and I realized that this was somebody important. But for the science, I don't have bad memories, really. I think it's only good memories, and I am very enthusiastic on what we do, and if I don't like what we are doing for some reason, I try to finish the project and to switch to something else.
Thank you. So maybe we can move on and pass to the last question. And so
Okay, if I had to give a single advice to young researchers at the beginning of their scientific career, which would it be? So I think my advice would be follow your way. So follow your way. I mean, I have always been convinced of the things that interest me. I am interested in some things. I want to follow my own way, but I always have eyes which look at what happens next to what I'm doing. And if my way somehow needs to take off from things that I have seen in other discussions and all that, I'm ready to mix everything. So I think it's important to have ideas, projects, to follow it, and not always jumping of all the new things. I think it's important to ask the good question, to realize that you have the tools to solve the questions, but also to be aware of what's going on around and be able to merge everything in your project. So that's my advice. And since I am a woman, okay, I come to the real, the woman problem. My advice is that don't think about it. You are a woman, but you are a scientist before everything. Don't calculate too much about when should I have a baby. I think it's not good to say after my thesis, after my postdoc, when I get a lab or everything. I think you have more and more responsibility in life, and it will not become easier afterwards. It will become more difficult and more difficult and more difficult. That's clear to me. I think it's easier to have your baby younger than older. Clear. What else? I think I have seen too many women who are not self-confident enough. They always think they are less good than the other, than the next man or the next scientist. No, women are very good in science, and if you are not convinced of that, come to my office. I will push you. I have seen many people, I push the people, I think they have to be confident. And one example is that it's clear that, for example, if you ask for a grant, I have seen women asking for little money and men asking for the same project much more. Ask for a lot of money, be not ambitious in the bad sense, but be ambitious thinking that you are able to do it. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. You want to give some advice also?
Well, I'll just give you some very simple advice. I mean, so science is difficult. Research is, excuse me, very challenging career, and not everything goes right. Much of what we do is doomed to failure because for various reasons. The hypothesis wasn't correct. The way we approached the experiments the design was wrong. So I think you have to be determined. You have to have faith and confidence in what you're doing, and try and see it through to fruition. But if it really doesn't look like it's going to work, then don't be frightened to say, no, this is wrong, and change topics, because too many people pursue the wrong hypothesis for too long, and then at the end of it, there's very little reward. So I think if you want to be successful, you have to judge the data for what they are and make the right decision. Don't be blinded just because you have a seductive hypothesis.
Well, if I can give you an advice, do it with passion. Everything in life with passion, including science. This is really the key thing. I think we are all motivated to understand what is life, how it works. And so if you do it with passion, when there are some ups and downs, you will remember only the ups. The other thing also is what I mentioned before, that you have to change a bit topic all along your career. And a good way to do it is to, for instance, go abroad to see another country during your postdoc and to see another topic. It's very important. But still having, of course, in mind some kind of continuity about what interests you. Do what is interesting for you. Don't do if you don't like to do, I don't know, I won't say anything to not to shock anybody, but there are some kinds of science that I don't like, for instance, myself. Don't do it, even if it's fancy and it's à la mode in Cell, for instance.
Thank you. So is there anyone in the audience that want to ask a question to, I don't know, students?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ariel from the Institut Pasteur of French Guiana. And as a woman, I would like to thank Pascal Cossard for the advice, because it's a real problem for women. And I have two questions. The first one is, because you three have a different background, so how do you, let me think about it. Like this. I would like to know how many postdocs do you think it would be good to have to be considered as a confirmed scientist? Because when you are in university, they say to you that you have to do postdoc, you have to do a lot of postdoc, and you have to go abroad, and you have a kind of different background, so I would like to know that. And the second one is, how do you cope with rejected paper? Do you see it as a failure of your research or not?
Okay, so the first question. I think you should not start by saying, I'm going to do 5 postdocs. You should start by having an idea that you are going to do 1 postdoc. I mean, I never said to anybody, you should do 2 postdocs or 3. But choose the good lab. Choose a lab where you have the good chance to be successful, which is not necessarily one of the major labs in the world, but you have your criteria and you choose the good lab. So that's my question. Maybe they don't agree, but this would be my opinion. What was the second question?
How do you cope with rejected
rejection paper. We all have rejected paper. Okay, so that's not a problem. I mean, it depends. You should choose the journal where you have the good chance. You should try to be the highest as possible. But how do we cope with? We think that the reviewer were probably intelligent people, and we try to ask ourselves. But we always have rejected paper. Those who do not have rejected paper, that's because they publish lower than the level of their paper. Otherwise, you get rejected. That's one opinion. Maybe Stewart doesn't have the same.
Hello. So I was wondering, because now it has become increasingly difficult to get permanent position of researcher, especially in France. So if you had to do it all over again, if you were one of us now, and you couldn't pursue a career in science, what would you choose as a career to minimize your frustration?
I mean, that's a very, very clever question, and also a very important one. I won't answer the part about the career structure and getting permanent positions and so on. Just because you have a permanent position doesn't mean that you'll be a better scientist or that you'll enjoy life more. My recommendation would be that you should, choose a career where you enjoy doing the work, and follow that, because you're going to spend a lot of time working, so you might as well do something which gives you job satisfaction, even if it's not science. And you shouldn't look at the whole business about scientific training is just that, is training, that what you learn in the process of researching for a PhD helps you in many other areas of professional life, not just in science.
I think you are very lucky. You have a PhD from the Pasteur Institute. There are thousands of people behind you who would like to be like you. So I think you should not ask this type of question to yourself. You should find a good postdoc, and I think the world is open to you. Yeah.
I completely agree. And you are going to San Francisco and UCSF, if I well remember, so you will be in a great place. Don't think about this now, okay? Well, just look at the statistics of the École Doctorale. Everybody is going to get a job here. It's not a problem. Maybe not in academic science, but everybody will have a high-level a job with interesting thing to do. So we should not complain. I know it's easy, but really, look at the statistics. Then after having looked into the statistics, you go and you do a great postdocs, and then we talk about this. Otherwise, for me, myself would have been to be a teacher. And actually, if I had not succeeded, and actually I'm lucky because I'm both a researcher and a professor now, so you can do both also.
Any other question?
First, I would like to thank the three of you for taking the time to give us some advices. It's very important. And my question is slightly different. I'm curious, being science and a scientific career, such a challenging and time-consuming career, what do you do to achieve a balance between your personal life and your career? Do you have some advices for us?
Yeah. If you work too much, your mind becomes tired. You're unable to think as incisively as you may need to. So switch off. Do something else. Sport is a very good way of changing your ideas. Obviously culture, art, music, things like, just do something completely different so that your neurons connect with a different activity, and you don't become obsessed with a particular scientific topic.
I'll answer first. I have a slightly different advice. Sleep less. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, well, we can't hide it. It's a lot of work, for sure. It's a lot of excitement at the same time. So it's part of your life, I think, when you are kind of really interested by a scientific question. But you can have a family, of course, kids, enjoy. And my advice would be when you're on vacation, you switch off your iPhone and you don't think about anything. I mean, you don't think about your work. I think that would be the best advice. Take a bit of vacation from time to time, and but don't do half of it.
So I don't agree with him. Sleep well. I think it's important to be in good health and to be en bonne forme when you go to the lab and everything. But I think it's important to realize that, yes, science is a lot of work. We work a lot. But in the same time, you should not be ashamed to do other things, like to do sports, to go to the museum, to go to the concert, to like cooking, to like enjoying life. So I think it's a question of equilibrium. But if you bring that to your lab, that's nice. If you are arriving in your lab because you are sad, you are stressed and everything, this is not good. So I think good equilibrium is via a good health. So that's you have it or you don't have it. But if you sleep well, again, I think it's important. And try to be equilibrated, yes. Equilibrium is very important. And when you have, for example, papers rejected or things like that, if you have something else, like a good book or a good exhibition, art exhibition you want to see and all that, that compensates. And I think it's very important at some stage. And of course, to have, if you have the possibility to have a family life, it's important.
Hi, thank you for the advice, especially because they are different. The question that I have is that you must receive a lot of postdoc applications, and because I think that some of us here would like to pursue toward academia, how do you discriminate a candidate? Do you favor the papers? Do you favor the technical skills? And to go further, which advice could you give us to sell ourselves the best?
Okay, I can answer. When I started to have a lab, I would take always the best CV. I don't think this is the best idea. As I told you, the best CV are not always. At some stage of my lab, I was searching for people with some competence or people with some human qualities. So I have always seen the people who came to my lab. Always, they always visited my lab. And if the people didn't know anything about what was going on, that was a very bad sign. So if you apply to a lab, you should know what's going on in that lab. That's clear. You should read about that lab when you write your letter, when you visit the lab, etc. I think there is no rule, and I don't think people are different from me, but at different period, you search for different type of collaborators. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, there was very sound advice from Pascal. If you're applying to a laboratory, write a personalized letter so that the PI, feels that you understand the topics that are going on there, and that you can identify with what they're doing, and that you can also contribute something, because not all labs have the complete skill set necessary to do something. So you should point out what you've learned in the past and how this could apply to the project that they're doing, and then take it to the next level. And something I do when I recruit people is I always get my lab to interview the new candidates, because basically you're going to be part of a structure, a team, and interpersonal relationships are very important. If you come along fine with your colleagues, then you'll work better, and things will go smoother for you. So I always pay a lot of attention to what my colleagues tell me, because they you know, they pick up on things and judge people using slightly different criteria to those of the PI.
Yeah, I fully agree. When you apply, I mean, the first thing is to have read the papers. I've seen people applying to my lab or to my postdoc lab. Actually, in my postdoc lab, the guy had to exit the room. Could not stay the day. He had not read the papers. If you want to work in a lab, you have to know what is the kind of style and kind of papers. And I think this is very important. We are like maybe artists or poets or writers. We have all a different way of doing science. Each of us has a different style. So you have to know whether the style of the lab, the way the science is done, is your style. I think it's very important. Afterwards, the kind of technical skills, you know, I didn't know anything about Drosophila. I could do Drosophila in a month or two. It's not very important. You can learn very easily technical things. It's more the way of the science is done, which is the most important, and whether the topic is interesting to you. So then prepare your interview. This is important. If you are interviewed into a lab where you cannot talk to the other people of the lab, there is a problem. You should not go to this lab. You have to talk to everybody in the lab. See how is the atmosphere. It's really what makes a difference.
So thank you very much. We really want to thank Stuart Cole, Pascal Cossare, and Arnaud. We have to move on because time is running. Thank you very much for participating.